Begin with, I want to highlight for the members of the committee that the director of the Northern Plains UAS test site, our test site located in Grand Forks, North Dakota, the director, Nick Flom, submitted a short written statement for the record for this hearing, and he talks about some of the technical challenges and priorities related to development of counter-UAS and strategies, and I would strongly encourage you to read that testimony. For Mrs. Chang, you mentioned in your written statement that federal law complicates your ability to research, develop, and test counter-UAS technologies. Can you describe the challenges you face in developing and testing counter-UAS technologies and provide examples of technology that would help you counter UAS threats that you are not currently permitted to test and evaluate? That you're not, so things that you can't do that you'd like to be able to do.
Thank you, Senator. So several things that we would like to be able to do that we can't do currently, and the technology is constantly evolving. But our efforts right now, for example, to detect drones that could pose a threat primarily rely on scanning the radio frequency spectrum. That raises questions under the Wiretap Act and the Pen Trap Act for use, as well as spending any money on research or testing, because its use is illegal, so testing it and acquiring it is illegal. Same with any of the disruptive measures that we would use, particularly jamming, raises questions not only under those statutes, but also the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, potentially the Aircraft Sabotage Act, several others that have been interpreted in new ways because of the development of technology. And because the technology use is illegal, we are not prohibited under our rules to spend money to purchase equipment that's illegal to use, and so we cannot test it.
So you can't test jamming?
We, I should say, am aware of only in like a sterile environment we are allowed to test, but we're not allowed to test in any where there could be any secondary consequences, which is not very realistic if you plan to use it, for example, in Manhattan.
Well, of course. Clearly something we have to test.
Yes,
and
sir.
Clearly something we have to figure out how we can develop testing for, because obviously we're going to need it.
Yes, sir.
So that's a very good point, very strong point. Thank you. Mr. Glawway, your written statement illustrates that we're becoming aware of more and more cases where UASs are being used for illegal purposes. As the commercial UAS industry grows, what additional legal authorities or technical capabilities do you need to track UAS air traffic and separate potential threats from friendlies? How would you benefit from requirements for UAS to identify itself or from the establishment of UTM, unmanned traffic management networks that might highlight cooperative and non-cooperative aircraft?
Senator, from an investigative standpoint, if you're working a national security investigation or a criminal investigation, the legislation is critical to allow us the procedures and policies and technical capability for identification of those nefarious. This is going to have to be a layered approach with our investigative capabilities, which currently exist, and our intelligence capabilities that currently exist. It would be layered in to the statutory authorities on how we identify it and disrupt threats. But due to the nature of the evolving and the quickness of these threats, this legislation is critically important for us to develop the technical capabilities, as the Deputy General Counsel just mentioned, in that environment of what we can do within the authorities that you all will grant us if this legislation goes forward, which we feel it must.
So you think this will help get you where you need to go in terms of, I mean, we're going to have a system where you've got sense and avoid and, UTM that allows not only the sense and avoid, but some ability to make sure that we're detecting the threats.
Senator, absolutely. It is as Chairman Johnson stated in his opening remarks, this is a strong first step to allow us the policies and procedures to layer in with those investigative authorities our law enforcement organizations have, and if it's outside the United States, layered in with the intelligence services and foreign partners of how we're going to mitigate this threat. It is the threat is very broad, permissive, and significant.
Ms. Stubblefield, I'm pleased to note from your written statement that the FAA is prioritizing ways to both remotely identify UAS aircraft and also development of unmanned, the UTM.
Yes.
System, so both the systems and the technology, again, that will sort out friendlies and threats. But you're focused on the airspace 400 feet and below, it looks like. So my question is, what about 400 feet and above? Are you looking at that as well for any criminal or terrorist type, any kind of threat activity?
Thank you, Senator Hoeven, for highlighting the remote identification requirement. From the FAA's perspective, we would like to see that requirement for all UAS. And as we consider putting together the rulemaking, which we're working on as aggressively as we can right now, we are certainly looking at putting requirements on operators, manufacturers, to such that when these come out of the box, there is a capability that is there, which is going to help regardless of where UAS operate, whether it's 400 feet or below, or as we move into the middle or even high altitudes. Those UAS that can function at, let's just say, to segment at 18,000 feet and above, so in Class A airspace. Those are going to be larger aircraft that will be certified. We'll have requirements in that airspace to be communicating with air traffic control. There's no doubt that we have challenges around the detection of what are generally a low and slow radar cross-section of UAS. However, those larger UAS, we certainly have a much better capability in terms of detection. As we stay down into the lower altitudes, and again, not to provide too much information about our security posture, but certainly we think remote identification is going to be key, because those who are not cooperating in the environment, that will hopefully, as our partners derive the authority to be able to deploy detection, they will stick out. And so we will know who's supposed to be there, part of the, as you mentioned, the unmanned traffic management, the suite of tools and capabilities that will go with that. We will know who is authorized to be there, who should be operating, is operating compliantly, and those who are outside of that hopefully will be detected by the systems that our partner security agencies will be able to field.
I'm out of time, but again, I would ask that you, all of the witnesses, please take a look at Nick Flom's testimony. I think it's helpful in your endeavors. Thank you.